Spina here with Spirit Training Group. For those that are new, we will offer consultation services to the entertainment industry. This includes like character designs for, say, a video game or gun designs for a movie or something. So that's partially what we're going to be looking at here. Now, it's important to note things in a video game and things in a movie are generally designed to be cool. And when they're designed to be cool, they're designed to be unique and interesting for the world and environment they're in. Now, sometimes they go a little too far into cool and make some things that absolutely shouldn't exist at all. Or, less likely, a little bit more often, they make something that's cool that makes a little bit of sense, so they lean it towards practicality, and then they give it an excuse for why it needs to look that way, or rule of lore. What we're going to be taking a look at today is the Titanfall R-101C carbine, which, interesting naming there. C would usually be indicative of it being a carbine, so this would say R-101C or R-101 carbine, but neither here nor there at the moment. What we're going to be doing today is taking a look at the cool version of it, taking a slight consideration of the justification within lore, and pointing it directly at rule of practical. Now, some of the things that we've come to find in this program or this little series is sometimes video games will do something and they will have to make changes based on the balance within a game or something. So some of the justifications between these three interacting don't always work. Sometimes it's gameplay balance, sometimes it's cool, sometimes it's because it's written in lore. So, first thing to note, on an assault rifle, or carbine in this particular case actually, carbines are generally slightly smaller assault rifles. Carbines are generally going to be reserved for crew members of tanks or rear echelon troops, say man artillery, who don't need a full-size rifle. In the case of a Titanfall pilot, that makes a lot of sense that they would be given a carbine. So, generally speaking, if an assault rifle is smack in the middle here, a carbine would be slightly more towards compact, but still fairly middle of the road. Now, one of the critical things with the carbine is that it is able to be stowed away pretty easily and basically folded up if possible, or more compact, because again, they're not primary service use, but still capable of fighting, so it's a very maneuverable weapon. So, another thing to note about a carbine is it is very secondary to it's like second in line to a primary service rifle. So an assault rifle needs to be able to be mass produced. So if you can reduce the materials within an assault rifle, that's going to compound hugely whenever you're manufacturing millions and millions. Well, carbines are generally second in line there, because you're going to need to manufacture a lot of carbines. If you didn't know, most service members in the military are not frontline troopers. They're not soldiers on the front lines. Most of them are the logistics or the medics or the intelligence guys. So they don't all need an assault rifle. So something like this is a very viable option. So let's take a look at some of the lore descriptions, or some of the things that are going to alter our assessment within this, to keep it somewhat in the realm of lore. We can see that it was broken down from a larger variation of rifle. We do actually get to see the R-201, and this is going to be a little bit of a play on the R-201 as well, even though that is a more updated version. But there's not huge enough difference between the two to make a completely separate video for that weapon. Some of what is really important to us is depicted as firing an 8.19 millimeter round. Normally I would do this prior to showing the edit, but I'm actually going to show this before I even do the edit at all. So 8.6 or 8.19 millimeter, that's a very large round to fit in that particular magazine. So we'd probably get less rounds. We'll do a millimeter measurement there to see how we're looking. If we can find another measurement, we'll be able to pull that. built for close and long range combat. Generally speaking, carbines are going to be close to medium. Same thing with assault rifles, close to medium. You can stretch them out further. Just carbine is a reduction on the main assault rifle generally, so that nomenclature would be a little incorrect. We see options to add various optics, muzzle devices, and other attachments, which is great because they do have the concessions for adding optics. For granted, this rail is very, very wide. I imagine this was probably a limitation on, what is that term where you, the poly mesh, limitation of shapes, whatever that's called, I can't remember, in the modeling to reduce the amount of shapes and angles to calculate for, just to use a wider rail space here. It's totally reasonable that will happen. Yeah, okay, here's the data that I was actually looking for. This is the stuff that actually helps a lot. So we can see that this is used by pilots on both sides of the war. We can see that this is used by the regular infantry and the robotic augmented, the Spectres, I guess. It's solid. I mean, it's a very versatile weapon. It makes sense to make it usable by just about everybody. Rate of fire 810 rounds. That is a little bit higher rate of fire than some other standardized assault rifles, but there are also other ones that fire faster than that. So it's not unbelievable. It just means it's going to be a little bit harder to control. But as it's a carbine with a shortened gas system, it's not unbelievable. Range of 32 to 44 meters. This is very much where we start talking about gameplay balance and stuff. Because we don't know the chemical makeup of the cartridge and the powder that's actually being fired, I can't necessarily calculate for that, or at least I don't see it yet. So unless this thing is completely dropping into the dirt at 50 meters, that range calculation is assumed to be a damage calculation, meaning after that short buried range, the damage drops off. 32 to 44 meters is extremely short. If you're getting ballistic drop-off, okay, a 45 caliber pistol, for example, it's considered to be a very, very short-range capable weapon. That round will be hitting the dirt at about 100 yards in front of a man-sized target. This is similar range to that, and this is a full-on carbine, so this has to be a damage calculation variable. But the problem with this damage calculation is with the 8.9. I'm sorry, there is an 8.6 caliber out there, so I'm getting mixed up. But the 8.1 chambering, that is a very large chambering. That means there's a large piece of metal going down range towards your target, and it is going to maintain that velocity because it is a large mass. If it's a lighter bullet, that means it's going to get more deviation, a little bit more augmentation from the environment. If it hits a twig, it's now going to deviate way off to the side. Whereas heavier cartridges like this are generally going to maintain that energy for a longer period of time. So, more effectively, this would probably more so have a range of around 200 or so meters, again, depending on powder charges that we're assuming this far in the future. But 200 to 300 meters, which is about standard for our modern rifles. But considering this is a carbine and a much heavier round than our modern rifles, we're going to assume a slight reduction there. We see that we have a 24 round magazine. Okay, so that actually stacks up with the larger caliber. That matches up pretty good. A ammunition reserve of 336. Oh, okay. So this is probably a gameplay thing. 336 is more than 10 magazines of 30 round ammunition, considering these are 24 round ammunition. I'll have to pop up the math here, but that's I would assume somewhere around in the ballpark of 15 mags. That's a lot. And you got to put that somewhere. If you're a highly maneuverable pilot who is primarily going to be manning a large tank like Titan, you're not necessarily going to want to strap on a huge amount of ammunition. The modern combat load is 300 or less, generally speaking. There are cases where other units, and say like the SOG operators in Vietnam, they carried more than 300 rounds of ammunition, but they're also not carrying body armor. So it gives and takes. They reduce their mass in order to add more mass and ammunition. In the case of the Titans and the pilots here, these pilots are carrying a lot of ammunition for also wearing a lot of armor and also being extremely agile. So is that also a gameplay thing? More than likely. Okay, we have another R-101 down here. Similar rate of fire. Range is increased a bit. This has to be a different Titanfall. Yep, Titanfall 2. Okay. So that's about all we need to see on the lore description. Well, not all there is to see, rather. Let's take a look at the actual rifle itself. First off, we'll start from the front here. We notice we have a prong flash hider. These aren't horrible options. I use prong flash hiders on my weapons for the most part. But in the case of this being a highly agile pilot, you don't really want exposed prongs that are going to get hung up on things. Again, remember these guys are getting in and out of Titans, so they're going to get hung up on things if you have additional stuff. Not to mention bouncing off of walls and stuff. If there's a vine or other debris, that's just more surface area to get caught up. We appear to have our gas tapped off the top, which works fine. That would be, yeah, that's approximate good length for a good gas tube. Looks like we have a flashlight underneath here. I don't know why this has this almost like castle top. I can't think what that's called right now. That weird serration to it. Doesn't really need to exist. You'll see that sometimes on flashlights for rifles if they are going to be used as a bludgeoning device. So you'll figure it out. I don't have one around me. Yes, I do. If you are going to use a flashlight with a weird serration on it like that, one of the ideas is that you would use it to muzzle strike. You'd use the flashlight as the forwardmost component to strike something. In this case, the flashlight doesn't go far enough to do that, so doesn't appear to be. So we'd reduce that. We do have side rails here with side rail covers. It is generally a good idea to put rail covers on if you're able to. It does add a very slight amount of bulk and weight, but one of the main components of rail covers is it's going to protect your hand and the environment from the sharp corners of the rails. This isn't a bad idea. It's kind of a preferential thing. Yeah, it's just preference. We also see that we have a hand stop here on both sides with a rail cover in between. This is a pretty solid choice, and this is actually a choice that you see around the time that this game came out. Magpul actually made a product that was specifically like this around that time, so that makes sense. I don't know why we have this riser on here. It's assumed that there's already a rail under this whole thing, and an extra 1/4 inch of riser doesn't need to exist, especially if you're not currently using it, say, with iron sights. So we're going to do away with that. That's something you can add on if you're doing optics. There is a shooting discipline where you want a higher optic. That way you're getting your head in a more upright position. I don't suspect that's the case for the pilots. But either way, it's not being used right now, so it's just added weight and bulk. Charging handle here. I don't remember in game if this reciprocates, but if it does, you don't want it to. Reason being, we saw this with the SCAR program. Whenever you're going to grip your weapon, more than likely your thumb is going to be out here, and it's possible to get your thumb hit by that. That is enough to damage your finger a bit, depending on calibers and charge rates and stuff. Might be enough to break your thumb, might be enough to just take off some skin. One other thing I want to take a note on, we already actually passed it up a little bit. This flashlight being embedded in this lower section, we already have side rails. So why would we embed that? I'd rather have an option to just remove it entirely. Of course, assuming it's a flashlight as well. I'll probably do away with that just to reduce mass. Remember, again, carbine that we're mass producing, anything that can reduce the material is going to make it better for us. We also see that we have this hand guard going all the way down here. This actually looks really comfy. This is one of my favorite aesthetics of this particular rifle, is this whole mag wheel thing. Problem is, this mag wheel is not going to work with this type of ammunition. Reason being, and I'm going to exaggerate this a bit, most bullets have a taper to them. Cartridges have a taper to them. So whenever it ignites, all that powder burns, and accelerates the bullet out the front of the round. The reason we have that taper is it concentrates the force of that gas into a cone, and it gives us higher levels of pressure. Now whenever you're stacking a whole bunch of these rounds, that taper starts to interact with the round below it, and or above it in this case. That is part of why we have curved magazines to begin with. If we have a straight magazine like this, it's assumed that there's no taper. No taper means we are getting perfectly squared up cartridges and setting them slightly back every so often. This can create feed issues because when that bolt carrier, this bolt carrier back here, when this bolt carrier comes and slams into this round, it's picking up the round from this back corner. When it does that, it creates an opposite force on the front of that round, wanting to nosedive it into the feed ramp of the weapon. Now you can change this up by adding modified feed ramps, but the thing is keep it simple, stupid, the KISS method. Why add complexity? This is complexity, and it adds on the forced engineering of additional feed ramp geometries and stuff like that. It could probably push directly into the chamber, but be it with this magazine capacity and this straight magazine design, it's more than likely a double stack magazine where there's one round and then slightly offset as another round, slightly offset as another round, slightly offset as another round. That way we can get the magazine capacity out of this. If it's double feed, or if it's double stack, it's more than likely double feed. So every now and again that bolt is going to feed from one side, then whenever that round is fed, now it's got to feed from this side, and when that round is fed, now it's going to feed from this side. So that's going to change up as it goes. This magazine design is going to be bad. Magazines are one of the most critical components of a firearm. That's part of why we use AR-15 magazines in so many designs nowadays, is because why change something that already works? So we're going to redo this entire magazine and housing. We also appear to have a very large magazine release, and it's also really far away from the shooter's finger. You're going to have to break your grip to get that. We see this with the Chris Vector that has some controls along here. You're good. That whenever you're shooting it, you can inadvertently release your magazine, or some of your other controls and components too, which not a great design. Though I love the way it looks, it's not ideal. I'm not sure what this control is. This might be the magazine release instead. In that case, I don't know what this is. Point being, we can simplify it, so that's what we're going to do. This is also a very large trigger guard, and it's not a lot of place for your fingers. Like, the shape seems a little off. We're going to change up those dimensions, make those a little bit more bearable. Our fire selector, it's in a decent spot, but we are going to change up some of that orientation there just to make it a little bit more ergonomic and efficient. Our stock, I'm not sure what this little winged flange is. If it's a stock release so you can extend it, well, it doesn't need to be there. That's also what that could be. So SCAR system actually uses something like this instead. This is a whole bunch of extra nubbins that doesn't need to be there. So we're going to simplify this design, and as a reminder, this is a weapon that's going to be stowed away on a pilot who is jumping all around or getting into a vehicle. we need to make this more efficient. Stocks are one of the easiest places to make things more comfortable. Overall, we do have folding sights. They do appear to be a little bit weak, but that could be a design element from Universe. You could argue, oh well, they have better metallurgy. Totally possible and realistic. So we're mostly going to leave the sights alone. Our sling swivels, I'll probably reduce that in favor of a more efficient sling swivel. They're QDs that we use more modernly nowadays instead of these type of sling swivels. So nothing else I can see immediately jumps out at me. So let's go ahead and get into the editing. What we are going to need to do here on the R-101C from Titanfall, we need to close up this muzzle device. We need to reduce some of this, mainly under the spirit of this is a carbine that's going to be strapped to the operator's side because they're not a primary frontline fighting implement, or they're in a vehicle or cruiser or something. We have a large amount of bulk around this trigger, magazine release, and guard. We're going to reduce that. And our magazine can't work, but not efficiently, with the ammunition that's being stated at least, or at least in modern ammunition. So unless there's some space magic going on, this isn't going to be a real thing. So this is going to be our biggest alteration right in here. We have some rail geometry that we need to reduce, and our stock has some extra bulk. So the main premise for most of the upgrading or editing that we're going to do is under the premise of this is a carbine. This is meant to be stowed away, or at least much more portable than a normal assault rifle. So let's take a look at what the updated one looks like. As you can see here, we shorten up the barrel just by about 2 to 3 inches or so. This will reduce our overall velocity a bit. But again, we're not looking to shoot anything beyond 300 yards or so, which 300 yards, 300 meters, they're close enough. That's about average engagement distances for at least modern day. And we're going to assume it's fairly similar in this universe. We also reduced some of the rail on the underside here. So this whole section here, you can see we brought it up just a little bit. Just like I said, if you can save material, let's go ahead and do it. Our magazine geometry. So, as we mentioned, most magazines have a curve in them for the tapering of the rounds and the necking down of the rounds. It kind of forces it in order for them to be in a proper feed angle into the barrel. One way other than a curved magazine to get away with this is slanting the base plate, because as the rounds are stacked in here, I'm going to kind of exaggerate this a bit, but because they're tapered, they will start to interact with each other, forcing them to face the proper dimension by the time they get lined up into the magazine. So this is one way we can do it, and this would be something we would actually look at in this particular universe, because there are a lot of straight wall magazines, or at least from what I'm seeing for the main rifles, most of them are very straight magazines. Why does that matter? If you have one primary fighting weapon that has a curved magazine and one magazine that has, or one primary fighting weapon that has a straight magazine, you're probably going to need to have entirely different rigging and magazine carrying equipment therein. So my pleat carrier right back here, those won't work with AK mags, which have a very, very strict, you know what? I have an AK mag. Here, you can see a normal AR-15 magazine. This is what I mostly prepare my stuff to be equipped for. AK mag, very curvy, right? I'm gonna try to line these tops up as much as I can. That way you can see how pronounced that curve is. So, As you can see, it somewhat fits. The main issue is on AK mags, where their magazine release is or magazine catch is, there's a small hook on the back. Doesn't work well with this type of rigging. Having a slanted magazine, or at least the base slanted like this, would work best for the rigging that the pilots and regular infantry and everybody else is going to have to carry. We also attached QD points, which already existed from this point at various intervals. There are different slinging methods. But having one at the front, middle, and rear give a lot of flexibility in how you might want to sling. Even if it's a unit by unit basis, you at least have the choice on what works for you. Our trigger guard, this was one of the larger areas that we had to police up a bit. We needed to keep the size close to the original, because this is apparently the size of the trooper's hands and stuff in the universe, so we know that the size is relevant. So we pulled the same thing, slightly straightened up the geometry here a little bit, so it's a less of an angle grip and more of a vertical grip. That is going to help whenever it's compact and needing to be run in quick momentum, like quick transitioning, as in running off of a wall and shooting at your target. Having it more vertical makes it a much more natural point of aim. You can point easier than you can point. So, same thing here. We did give a slight undercut here. There's a little bit of a modern shooting discipline that recommends doing this. Neither here nor there, it's kind of a preferential thing. We also kept our trigger guard much less open than it used to be. The main purpose of the trigger guard is to protect the trigger, so we needed to do that. Our magazine release is reduced, and we got it closer, so the shooter can actually hit this with the firing grip. And we pulled our fire selector forward and gave it a third point of position. So we, in theory, have semi-auto on here as well. As for our stock, we pulled this cheek riser up, made it a little bit larger. If you have the real estate on a stock to make the cheek riser adjustable, you may as well make it the entire size of the stock, because you're going to have a lot of different shooters. The entire purpose of adding an adjustable stock and an adjustable cheek riser is to allow it to be usable for multiple shooters. So if we give ourselves more surface area, we're more likely to make it comfortable for more shooters. So that's what we did here. We also just reduced some of the overall mass. There could be a theory behind having this with that staircase step, but I'm just going to reduce it in general. Some stocks are specifically shaped as if they're another grip, usually on machine guns. I don't have one around me again. That way, whenever you're shooting with your firing grip and it's in the prone or maybe braced up against cover, you can bring your other hand up and cup that stock and pull it into your shoulder a bit more. This is a carbine on very mobile units, not likely to be the purpose on there. Overall, that's all we have for the R-101C, and some of the adjustments I think would personally go quite well for their purpose in game. If one of the other things that we kind of do in these is debating how far to take this. I can reduce this 100% to the most practical, most usable thing, then that takes away entirely from the art style. So some leftover additions to art style, for example, are this little magwell grip area. We wanted to keep it somewhat in line with the original art style, just to give it that extra zest and appeal that it has. However, if we were going 100%, this rail would come all the way back to the back, or at least right about there, and this weird magwell grip thing wouldn't exist. This magwell would just come up and be like that. So, something of note. Similarly, this gas block, we could pull it in and tighten it up just a little bit, but it also adds to the image a little bit. More than likely, this would actually be tucked in a bit more with just a little bit of adjustment on the outside, assuming this is an adjustable gas block. No, overall, that's all we have for the R-101C from Titanfall. Thanks for coming. Hope you enjoyed. If you didn't, feel free to leave a comment below and tell me where I'm wrong. Appreciate you.